of these different annotations. So it could be that for one analysis, I want to do a query on Wikidata, and I only want that gold standard annotation. It may be, if I'm doing an enrichment analysis, though, I want to pull in all the text mine annotations that that I presented before, or I want to find all community annotations under the assumption that it's not perfect, but it's good enough, and it will improve things. So, great points.
I want to point out that Grameen tried to do a plant gene wiki that failed miserably mostly because they only thought about the first step, which is creating a wiki, and never about getting the stuff back in, never about forming any sort of community, and it was a huge waste of time and money. But Pankaj and Doreen in my group have, as part of our grant, this third grant that we got from Grameen, are trying to work with Crispin Taylor at ASPB for the main plant journals to force submissions to give us structured data, because we no longer have any sort of budget for curators. Because we had that in the early days of Grameen. So we're trying to work with ASPB to do that. I don't know where it's gone, but hopefully we will at least get web annotations, maybe these supporting data files. But I think you have to make people. That's all.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah,
I make a response to that. A lot of people are trying to solve this problem, and I think one thing that might be kind of putting a lid on it is, if this gene wiki happens and your gene wiki happens, they need to be able to share. People need to be able to pull from both of them, rather than saying, well, I'm going to put my information in this one, and then it kind of gets lost because people are looking in a different one.
Yeah. Frankly, I think the solution, I mean, Wikidata is in some ways the solution to that, right? Because anybody can add it to it, right? So if that becomes the aggregation platform. If we're focused on human gene annotations, mined from Wikipedia, goes into Wikidata. If other groups are interested in gene annotations for other organisms or mined from other sources, that becomes the aggregation platform. So now it just becomes, is the Wikidata data model generic enough to handle all that, to be that integration platform?
One thing about the Wikidata, how easy is it to tell what source provided that information? So one of the problems we have in cancer is we like to check against a SNP database that isn't just a SNP.
Right.
You'd be surprised how many actually somatically acquired cancer-causing mutations are actually in SNP-DB as SNPs. Like, quite a significant number. And that's often why people go to a particular source, is because they trust that it's had additional validation done on the top. So within Wikidata, you want to be able to tell who provided this information. Do I trust this resource as well as the system as a whole?
Absolutely, right. And so, for example, all the gene ontology annotations, for example, that we're uploading, we're saying it comes from the Gene Ontology Consortium, it has this evidence code. And once it's structured, anybody can use that structure as a way to filter whatever they're interested in. So if, for example, we talk to your collaborators and say, okay, how do we get all these SNP data into the database, right? I mean, we should have, this comes from dbSNP, this comes from Cosmic, this comes from a text mining application that's a little bit out there. I mean, we should be able to encode all that.
Because basically what you could end up with basically what you would get is a conflict, basically SNP-DB saying it's a SNP, Cosmic saying it's mutation.
Yes. And that is actually an important design principle behind Wikidata. It's not about representing truth, right? It's about representing statements. So you can have conflicting statements as long as they can be attributable to the source.
Truthiness.
Yes, truthiness.
Oh, Amelia?
Oh.
I'm interested to know what interactions you've had with the community about this. For example, contributing back the annotations that you've you've generated through your text lining up. I can see.
It's been a challenge, right? I mean.
Because I used to work on Go, and I know that it's that. Yeah.
I mean, right?
They wouldn't just take any old annotations.
No, absolutely, and I wouldn't ask them to, right? What we wanted to do was to be an efficiency gain for a curator, right? Curators are undoubtedly have too much to curate and not enough time. and we wanted to know whether or not our mined annotations could help that process. We haven't found the right model to be an efficiency win yet.
Because there also appears to be a fair amount of overlap between what Go currently provides. And I mean, I know you've got the added value of the disease ontology annotations, and presumably you can use other robot ontology annotations. So I'm just interested in the kind of interaction that you're.
Look, we have a great interaction. I get to be on the SAB of the Go consortium, and so I really like participating in that community. We're still working out those interfaces. But having said that, right, the analysis that I tried to explain, and maybe I went too fast, was that there are two ways the Go annotations are used, right? It's here, I have a gene of interest. Tell me what is true about this gene, and it's that has to be rock solid, right? But the enrichment-based analyses, right, have a tolerance for false positives and false negatives. And I think what I tried to show is that the community mined annotations for that, right, enrichment analysis loves that, right? It has more tolerance for, in the enrichment analysis, it has more tolerance for the false positive and false negative. So I think there's more room to incorporate mined annotations that haven't been blessed by a curator in some of the large-scale analysis.
I don't know, this is just sort of a vague, like concept, but there's a lot of different communities, and everybody is very attached to them. I work on such and such, and so do you think there's anything within Wikidata that will accommodate just that diversity, or whether people would like to work on individual parts of it without being part of the centralized database?
The biggest thing I can see is that Wikidata, and this idea in general, community annotation in general, creates a niche for somebody who is not the gatekeeper on some model organism database, but is interested in structuring that data, right? So again, right now, suppose I think the gene ontology is missing something, right? There's an annotation that's missing, right? I go email the Go consortium and say, ask an annotator to look at it. Please get it into here, yada, yada, yada. And generally, the Go consortium is good at that, but you're still relying on somebody else to put it in a form that other people can use, right? The beauty of Wikipedia and Wikidata is that anybody is empowered to do that themselves, right? And I think that's important, right? Maybe you didn't generate that data. Maybe this is a paper you've read, and look, it's plain as day, right? It should just go in. Now it should be attributable, again, as not Go blessed, right? It came from you, and it's linked to this PubMed ID, and that maybe has a lesser confidence in the eyes of a consumer. But at least a consumer is able to access that data, and at least you're able to provide that knowledge to the rest of the community in a way that the community can use. That's, to me, is the fundamental difference behind, the fundamental thing that this type of idea adds to the landscape of knowledge management.
I think that maybe part of what Colin is getting at, though, is the idea that, I don't know if Colin's working on Hymenoptera right now, but I know that he's in the group that works on Hymenoptera. So say you've got annotators for Hymenoptera. Could there be a Hymenoptera view of the Wikidata data that would be available to them, so that they would still be in their community without being in the broader world of Wikidata, which is much bigger? Is that kind of?
Well, I feel that there absolutely could be. But
it feels to me like there could be too, and that might be worthwhile.
Presumably groups can build their own interfaces using Wikidata.
Right, and that's what I was thinking. I was thinking about that too.
But the thing that I was just more concerned about is that sometimes just being interconnected with so many things causes version incompatibilities, even just with regards to information being compatible. So sometimes you create an assembly and then that's this version of the assembly. So you would need to sometimes like stage different interactions in the community?
I think you're alluding to a lot of, devils in the details types of issues.
Yeah.
And absolutely real, but it's sort of like, I don't think there's any insurmountable things in there. I mean, it'll be a messy process, right? It's definitely watching the sausage being made. But, right, I think at the end of the day, right, it's good, right? Do we have time? I don't know. We have
Well, I mean, all we're doing is cutting into our lunch. It's fine.
You're the boss. Anyway. Okay.
I just wanted to make an argument for how important it would be for Wikidata to pull from other sources. Although the long tail is extremely important and it would be great to utilize them, those gatekeepers, those main curators, are also really important. And to capture them in Wikidata so that as scientists we would only have to search one source is critical. And some of them might turn up their nose at going to a widely available, can be edited by anyone source. So I think pulling from those other data sources, it will be key for actually making this useful for scientists.
Absolutely, and that's where we're starting. Just to be absolutely clear, we're starting with the gold truth to get in there. And the point that I want to emphasize, your point is spot on. Period. And sentence. I think the one thing that Wikidata allows is to have these different tiers of confidence, and importantly, have those tiers be computable. Right? There are even applications where I would want to limit my analysis to only what's in the Go consortium, for example. And there are other applications where I want to get every annotation that is even hinted at in Wikidata. And the point is that can be computed, and the formats come back in the exact same thing. I'm not trying to do, joins of Excel tables and yada, yada, yada. I think that's one advantage.
My point goes a little bit further, though. I think that Wikidata needs to actively pull from the other sources. I don't think that you can rely on the other sources contributing directly to Wikidata.
So this goes back to the statement that I had before, is that we as a community, us in this room, should be that broker, right? I'm not involved in any Go pilot curation. I'm not involved in Wikidata development, but I can take what the Go consortium produces, reformat that, figure out the API, and put it over here. Anybody in the community is empowered to do that. So for example, right, there are a lot of organisms represented in the room. I'm not going to be able to do every single organism, but if you feel like there is gold standard information for your organism that needs to be in Wikidata, go for it, right? That's the beauty of Wikidata and community annotation.
I mean, gold standard data sources tend to also be structured. So you can write a bot that comes in and dumps into Wikidata.
Yeah.
The only issues that arise, really in my view, are legal with regard to copyright. Right? So are those communities open to having their data sucked up into the vacuum and things? And I guess go act boldly and ask forgiveness later, perhaps, is the best way of going about things. But
wait for my speech later.
Yeah. Realistically, you can't suck someone's data in if they haven't provided it in the format that allows you to suck it in. If somebody wants the data to be sucked in other resources, you normally provide it in a format that allows you to do that.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you did that, like when you take the Go data and put it in, what's the source? Go or you?
I think yes. I think the answer, because I would love it if the source showed up as the GMOD2014 consortium, showed up as our bot that did the migration, and showed up as the PubMed ID in support of that annotation. I would love it if all of that were in there.
It's actually that's part of the standard, is the actual source of the annotation is in the data.
Yeah, you just have to be careful about when you move the data, you move it in a way, I trust you move the Go data, that's just fine. People have taken our phenotype data, not pointing fingers, but no, I have tried to, and it's very hard to figure out exactly what to do with it.
Yep.
And how to make it make sense, and then they end up with some sort of nonsense going on, so. Just, you know,
Yep,
these are things, again, definitely details.
yep, absolutely.
Things that can happen.
The one thing the Wikimedia Foundation is very cognizant of are licensing issues and things. They've got, it looks from the outside like they have a lot of infrastructure for managing licensing issues and legal provisions and things.
All right. Well,